I'm Paul Glumaz, and today is the 22nd of January, and we just had Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday, Junior's birthday. So what I want to go through with you is to get a sense of the craziness that is happening in the Congress right now with this impeachment process, and how these people can get up there and just go on and on and on and on and on with no actual crime, no actual evidence, no actual anything. And then at the same time, you have in Switzerland the yearly World Economic Forum conference known as the Davos conference, where 190 billionaires showed up. 190 billionaires showed up, with Greta Thunberg leading the way, with Mark Carney, the former head of the Bank of England, now the leading environmentalist in the world, mobilizing and turning the Davos conference into this shall we say, chorus for climate emergency, shutting down the very basis of our existence. I mean, you have to ask yourself, how is it that anything like this could be tolerated by anybody in our society? How can either of those things be tolerated in our society at this time? You have to ask yourself. People, I mean, that's true. People are watching the impeachment process, and a lot of people turned off. The number of people watching this now is significantly less than what they did when they were watching it before, when it was when they were doing the hearings on whether to impeach. And you have to ask yourself, what is going on with these people? How does this work? And you have this insane situation. I've never seen this in my entire life in a presidential race, where leading billionaires like Tom Styer and Michael Bloomberg are running bogus presidential campaigns, which are not serious, but they're using the presidential campaign as a cover for putting, in the case of Styer, hundreds of millions of ads attacking Trump and wanting to impeach him. And in the case of Bloomberg, he's going to be putting forward $2 billion of ads. But he's not a serious candidate. Because you know why he's not a serious candidate. You know why he's not a serious candidate? Because he's putting $2 billion not so much to promote himself, but to attack Donald Trump. Now, if he were to put $2 billion into buying the machinery to get elected, you wouldn't have money for those ads. So that's how you know it's a bogus campaign. And so is this Tom Styer campaign. But we've never had these billionaires come out like this in their own name to run these campaigns for the impeachment of Donald Trump and also for the green fascist agenda, for the depopulation. We've never seen this before. And these are the suckers who made these billions on financial speculation, who made these billions in hedge funds, who made these billions in looting the population. They're coming out in the open like that. And what's happening in response in the Democratic primary process is the polls are going up for the people that they don't like Bernie Sanders, who's a populist, who's going on the 1% versus the 99%. You know, he's like a record saying the same thing over and over again. Well, that's probably more effective than these other people. So Bernie Sanders is now in the process of becoming the leading candidate. because all the other people aren't like a broken record. At least he's like a broken record. So you gotta understand how one has to think, why is this insanity going on? And this goes back to something that Lyndon LaRouche wrote a speech for when he was in prison, which was delivered in Germany in January of 1993. And what he said was very interesting. He said that the elites in the West have been involved in a cultural revolution based on the idea of Aquarius, or the idea of Dionysius, or Nietzsche, or these modern philosophers, which is no longer to be base policy and societies ruling on the process of reason involved in science, involved in solving problems, in reasoning things through, and using the unique human cognitive qualities that we all have as the basis for government, as the basis for science, as the basis for anything. But rather to be the shift is in this cultural revolution is to base society on a very different kind of thought process, not reason, but symbolism, emotion, catharsis, feeling states, associative, which is not thought in the sense of a reasoning things through, but is you associate something with something. And he says this is a lot like the ancient feminine cults, the ancient feminine cults. And so you have, of the Roman period, so you have essentially, in the last 27 years since LaRouche said this, you have a society where the very cognitive process that you used to have, that you used to develop in your education, is not occurred, but rather you have people doing associative emotions, identity, symbolism, not the content, not thinking things through, not using the God-given powers of that all human beings have, but rather these other means. And so you have essentially a society which is not operating on the basis of reason. It's operating on the basis of feeling. It's operating on the basis of association. It's operating on the basis of symbols. This means this means that. You know. So you have 3 generations of people who have been moved in this direction. So, if you try to scientifically explain to them that wind and solar and have a lower energy flux density and cannot physically support a large population or a large industrial base, it doesn't matter, because that's not how they think. They associate solar and wind and what have you with saving the planet from carbon dioxide emissions. They associate that with saving the planet. They associate that with some kind of non-reasonable capability. And also they associate that emotionally with their own identity. So these people are out there, and you have the billionaires financing this, and they know what they're doing. What they're doing is going to cause a rapid reduction in the population of the planet. They know that. That's fine with them. But the people are being suckered into it. They've lost the capacity to reason. Okay? For the most part. And they don't think in those terms anymore. So you ask them, well, don't you want to see an increased economy with more production and a better living standard? And they say, no, you're going to hurt the environment. You know, And so you have all these incredible labyrinthian environmental impact rules that you have to do before you do anything. So it takes years and years and years to do anything. Finally, Donald Trump is starting to wipe all that out. But this is what you're dealing with as far as the climate change issue. And you have the same problem with the Democrats on this impeachment thing. Don't they see that none of the things they're accusing the president of add up to a impeachable crime according to the way the Constitution is written? Can't they see that? No. And they're depending on a population that can't make that connection. So what is it? It's a mobilization of feeling states, of associations, of this and that. And there's no criteria of reason, of even a legal reasoning, of even lawyer reasoning. And so what you get up there, when you get up there, what you're seeing right now going on is this incredible posturing and sanctimonious sophism that is just, it's making a lot of people sick because they can see it. You know, it's like it never ends. It's you know, and there's nothing there. But that doesn't matter because we're not doing reason anymore. We're going according to this principle of you know, how you feel about it. You know, that's more important. How do you feel about Trump? Well, I don't feel good about Trump. I don't like the way he talks. I don't like the way he grabs women's crotches or whatever. You know, I don't think that's right. But there's no connection between what the issue was that got him elected and reality. There's no connection. These people are not connected. It's one thing to be against Trump because you're a billionaire environmentalist, but it's another thing to be against Trump because you think he's some kind of right-wing monster who's going to go to war, or to be against Trump because you think he's a fascist or a Nazi. But they can say that. They can say he's a Nazi. They can say he's a fascist. They can say, because it's all symbolism. There is no way to define anything in this kind of and this is what LaRouche was saying was the intention of the elites back then and before, to base a society on these kind of things. So in that situation, the media becomes so important. Everything becomes important. So let us go back to 1968 when Dr. King was assassinated. And he was not assassinated by a lone assassin, I don't think at all. He was assassinated by the establishment. And why was he assassinated by the establishment? Well, largely because he was going against this kind of associative reasoning. I mean, racism is an example of this kind of emotional associative system. But more importantly, what he was doing two things. One, he was calling out the Vietnam War for what it was. It's not that he was against the Vietnam War. Yeah, a lot of people are against the Vietnam War, but he was calling it out for what it was. He said, this is a continuation of European colonialism. The subjugation and looting of the world by the United States becoming a party to this European colonialism. What else was he saying? He was beginning to get involved in the labor movement, connecting up the universal concepts that he had from the civil rights movement into the labor movement. He was beginning to tap into that quality in people that is universal, that is reason, that is optimistic, that is looking for a future, that is thinking in terms of future generations. And so you had this conference in Davos it was pretty dismal. And then comes along this President of the United States. And what does he do? Well, he does something very extraordinary. I was quite surprised. This is the most LaRouche-like speech that Donald Trump has ever done. What he does is he says, essentially, in a very poetic sort of way, at the end of his speech, that there are no limits to growth. The prophets of doom talking about an apocalypse, it never came. They said there would be a popular famine by the 70s. It didn't happen. They would run out of energy, oil by the 90s. It didn't happen. And he said, look, human beings are able to solve problems and create the future, even if they don't have the solutions now. And he went into how the period of the European Renaissance demonstrates for the modern period how these solutions were solved in the cathedral building, particularly the building of the Dome in Florence. And he put forward this idea that it's the worker that counts, the artisan, the worker, the scientist, the family. These are the things that a nation exists for a future, so that future generations can see what this generation has done for them. And I'm not saying it all because I don't have the text, but if you get a hold of the text, you should read it. It is incredible. It's a total attack on the entire green thing, but from a higher standpoint of the pessimism in the culture that is at the root of all of this. And what really struck me about it is that this is the guy that a large portion of America is now looking to for the very psychological survival. Because if Trump weren't saying things like this and weren't going out, and he described how Ivanka is involved with 400 companies to create millions of job training through the companies as part of the government promoting, as part of his promotion of creating reviving an educated workforce. So you have a large portion of the population which is had a very dismal, was looking at the world in a very dismally, and are in very dismal circumstances. They are looking to the president. Their hopes on President Donald Trump is what's keeping them going. It's the hope in the future. Because they don't see any other hope out there but what they hear from Donald Trump. And that's a very precarious thing to be in. So now you have this entire bashing coming in on the Congress and everywhere, and to crush this hope. To crush this hope, which is a hope that's in the population that Trump has tapped into, and which Trump has now had to represent. And so it's a very precarious situation that everything depends on this one person surviving, and with him survives the hope of a better future. So it's pretty stark when you think about it. And this speech is something, is far superior to anything he has said before, and far more profound, and far more directly attacking the underlying way of thinking and assumptions that govern this green thing, which is 190 billionaires in the entire financial system saying they're going to penalize people and companies that invest in fossil fuels and invest in non-green energy, or don't do the carbon thing or whatever. We're at a point of mass genocide and war. So I say this because Vladimir Putin is echoing similar comments. we're going to light up Africa. Trump said we're going to light up the world. What does he mean by lighting up? He means electricity. That's what Putin meant. We're going to bring nuclear power plants to Africa to light up Africa. Trump is saying we need second-generation nuclear power plants. I mean, how many people in politics today would have the courage to stand up and say they're for nuclear power in that way, and for fossil fuels, and say that the entire the whole carbon thing is the biggest fraud in all history? Trump has said that. And so this is where we are in terms of the situation. But it is still a very dangerous situation in the Middle East. It is still a very dangerous situation with the financial system, whose collapse they're going to try to blame on Donald Trump. And I'm sure Donald Trump will try to blame it on the bankers and the Federal Reserve and the City of London when that happens. So we're entering this period. Now, what's happening to the Democratic candidates is totally bizarre. Because they have adopted the same economic policy, which is the Green New Deal, there's no distinction between any of them. And only the broken record of Bernie Sanders is the only one that's relatively consistent. And it looks like that's what is going to be growing in the Democratic Party as people turn against these billionaires, the progressives who support Bernie Sanders, or the progressives who will leave Elizabeth Warren for Bernie Sanders, because they've had enough of these billionaires coming in to try to run the Democratic Party. And then you have Hillary Clinton coming out attacking Bernie. You can't imagine that would be the best thing for Bernie Sanders, is to have Hillary Clinton come out attacking him, because she is hated by a large section of the population that intends to vote Democratic. So this is a very bizarre situation with the president, with a relatively popular president being assaulted in the Congress. And so we're going into the primary season. I believe, when is Super Tuesday? Super Tuesday is the beginning of March, I think. February. No, March. Super Tuesday, not New Hampshire, but Super Tuesday is like March. After March, who knows where we'll be in the Democratic situation. But the political situation, if Trump campaigns the way he gave this speech at Davos, he's going to be campaigning from a different paradigm, a radically different paradigm that the entire population has been accustomed to. And I'm looking forward to that. So I want you all who are listening to this to reflect upon what I just said, that we've had a collapse of the process of using reason to make policy and to base our society on. It's not based on that anymore. The working class which may be the least educated class, is still the most reasoning class, because they have to use, to some degree, the reason that they have in the workplace, since they're involved in actual work. Okay. Whereas the people involved in the computers and the people involved in the administrative end, they're mainly doing operations. Yes, there's some people in the computers that use reason to create the programs. They have to figure out how to create the programs, but most of the people in the computer business are just drones punching in data. So you have to understand that it's a paradox that the least educated people in the society are the most reasonable, in the way they think. Not because they have an education, but because they're involved in the physical work. They have to think if they're going to be doing landscaping, or if they're going to be doing construction, or if they're going to be doing machining, if they're going to be doing anything. They have to use their mind. The skilled labor has to use their mind. They have to think rationally at least part of the time. Okay, and that's also something that Trump implied in this presentation. So we have this incredible collapse of the power of reason in our society, and a new culture is needed. And so in that context, I want to say that this is the 250th anniversary of the birth of Ludwig von Beethoven, and today is, and this year is the year to think like Beethoven. And everybody who's watching this needs to start listening to Beethoven, because that is where you see the highest form of reason being applied to creating classical music. And it's the attack on classical music that was part of this transformation to these other forms of thinking, which are not human reason, but are something else. And that is where we are. We are in that situation where we have to begin the process of restoring. The other thing that Trump emphasizes is the concept of beauty. He's the first person to talk about beauty as president in the recent period as a principle. In the modern view, beauty is not universal. It's only in the eyes of the beholder. Whereas in Trump's idea, the Renaissance created beautiful things. And these beautiful things are the things that create life, create a love of mankind, create a love of the future. So this is quite remarkable. And that's where I'm going to stop.
Common stock investments have helped to make our country prosperous and powerful. Owning a share in American industry is like owning a share in the future of our nation. But remember, John Q, there is a risk as well as an advantage in owning any kind of property. So get the facts before you put your money to work.